Hello friends, my name is Tori Solis of Blue Nose Trading, and today I'm recording a collaborative episode with Kevin Ferris and Ryan Houston of the Bonsai Pot-cast. I'm super grateful that y'all had time to talk with me today, so let's get right to it.
And this is a crossover episode with the Bonsai Pot-cast. Nice.
That's my
good.
YouTube intro.
That's a good one. Very
with modification.
Very professional.
Very good
One
production
take.
there.
Guess how many times I've said it?
A bajillion. No.
At least.
How many years have you been doing YouTube?
4 or 5. I think 4.
Okay, so at least 200 times then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what questions you got?
Well, I guess the first thing I wanted to say was I know that you guys are super involved. Well, at least Ryan is very involved. Are both of you involved with your clubs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
both on the board, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm becoming the second vice president. I don't know what the responsibility is in every club, but for me specifically, I'm going to be running the club show in the spring and the club auction in the fall. And I have approximately 0 experience with that. So do you guys have anything you could offer me as advice for what to kind of do?
I would say that's kind of in your favor because you don't have anything of a guideline in a sense to dictate how you want to do it. You're more of an open court to allow other people to help you. Within Ryan and I, we basically ran putting together a show with our friend Dane last summer. We learned a lot from that, and we're trying again. Ryan, you want to go on?
Have some suggestions? Yes.
Yeah. What are your suggestions?
If we start on the bonsai show aspect, my suggestion would be to, I don't know what kind of like documents the past people who've organized the show may have for you, or like if any things are set in stone already, because that would be great, save you some work if they do have those types of things. But if they don't have those things, try to make them so the next year it's less work for you or for whoever. And then my other advice is see if you can get like a couple areas where you can delegate and try to put some people in charge of those. Oftentimes the person who's organizing the club show is kind of, you can check on the people you delegate to, but then anything that doesn't get delegated, you kind of have to pick that up. Mm-hmm. So the more that you can delegate, the more that, you guys can do all together rather than just putting it all on one person.
Yeah. So create committees with committee heads, managers, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And in those, you'll pick up the pieces that are left, but it should be less pieces to have to carry around.
Yeah. And practically, I'm not sure how big your club is. The Columbus Club isn't huge, or at least on the side of volunteers, it's not huge. So it's like one person was in charge of volunteers, not like a whole committee. But that is fine. That's all you need. Mm-hmm. But then the head people are doing a lot. So the more that you can delegate, the better.
If you can be in a position to where you're the point of contact and you have to deliberate between certain parties, that's ideal, as that's what we're trying to do for this year, for Ryan and I and other people involved. And we're also gaining more of a continuation of being able to have a local proximity for the people in our club as opposed to driving farther out of town for a venue. That's where we kind of ran into problems last year, as the venue was graciously granted to us for free. But it was a 45-minute to almost an hour drive one way. So that was a little bit of a conundrum. But this year we're looking more centralized in Columbus and then going from there. So we should have a higher output of help, ideally.
It was sorry.
Go ahead. I was just gonna ask, what does your club normally do for their show? Like, is it a big event or a small event?
Okay, this is perfect. I've never been to the club show.
Oh,
That's
okay.
how, but I was at the club auction, and that was super easy and really well organized. And this was sold to me as being already just, you can just like plug and play. Like they said that they have all of the paperwork and that it's going to be very organized. They said that if I wanted to, I can just follow the checklists and make the club show happen that way.
That's great.
And I think I'm committed for 2 years with this position. So maybe for the first year, I might just run it to the book and see. And then the next year, because they told me if I wanted to make any changes, like, it's my show, so whatever. And like I'm me, so I'm like, can we make it a little weird? But I think
Yeah.
maybe the first year we'll just not make it weird. We'll just do normal.
One thing I would highly suggest, if they don't have a proposal outline already established, to get one established. That way, if you're going to a venue, you have that in context. And then if you have them signed, you both know that if something needs to change, they have to run it with you. They can't just drop it on you last minute. In relation to like a proposal says this agreement for this time, whatever price, if it's free or not. But that way you're both in detailed of like I don't want to say maybe a legal agreement, but also that agreement is exactly. And that would serve a lot of less headaches and heartache and pain.
It technically counts as a legal agreement. If you want to pursue it, you would have a case. I took
That's true.
business law.
This is true. I'm gonna say running my own business now, I've learned a lot. Yeah, it just go with the flow too. You know, people that are there have been there a while. Doesn't necessarily mean it worked in the past, it will work in the future, but sometimes things need to change too.
It's true. I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but also,
improve it.
Maybe tweak it.
Yeah, I think I need to see
Add
it
some
first,
hubcaps
though.
or whatever. Yeah.
You can't just come in, guns blazing, trying to change things, and you don't even know how they work. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like I am all for change, and I am a reckless force of chaos, but also I don't want to make discomfort. Try to minimize the discomfort I cause while being a reckless force of change. It's a fine line to walk.
You gotta like ease them into it.
Hold that for year 2.
Basically.
Tori, do you remember what you were trying to say earlier?
No, that was it.
Oh, okay.
I was going to tell you that it was well planned out, and you were going to say, hey, make sure it's planned out.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
All
right. So another thing that we were thinking of was with regards to like the club thing is like getting, and I'm sure you guys are thinking about this too, because it seems to be a common thought, but let's talk about it on a public forum. How do we get younger people involved in bonsai? And I don't mean the TikTok kids, although they are welcome.
Yeah.
I think I mean like us.
Well, do you need the TikTok kids, if you want to call them that, the TikTok community, I will say, in regards of their outsourcing to get more people involved is quite high.
Oh, no, they're good. I'm sorry, that came off wrong. What I meant was like people who are under the age of 30 have a lot of stuff going on, and getting into a long-term commitment hobby might not be the best target necessarily.
Right. I mean, in response to that question, Ryan and I did create the first ever bonsai club at the Ohio State University in the history of the school.
Nice. Is it going good?
It's going. It's that niche thing like you're talking about. You know, a lot of what we're dealing with is I'm the continuing president, Ryan's the treasurer. It's that condition of students have school life, and sometimes majority live in a dorm. But we've also enacted the idea of a lot of people want to have plants. A lot of people want to know how to take care of plants. So we utilize that consideration. As I'm a horticulture major, it's my focus. Ryan is microbiology. There are those things where sometimes you have to put things in place to have them there for a moment of time, but it may not always live on.
I think you're right.
And so that's been a constant thing. My home club that I grew up in was the Bonsai Society of Portland. And they're now at 500 plus people. When I first went to my first meeting ever, back in 2016, I think it was, there was 150 people there. And a way that they engage with new people was quite amazing, but scary at the same time, but it gets you out of that, comfort zone. In my case, I put on my big boy pants and went to the thing. And I became really good friends he's a friend and a mentor, the Bonsai Club president at the time, Lee Cheadle. The thing that he's done and people continuously do now is that you start the meeting, but you also allocate time for, hey, are there any new people here? If so, please stand up.
Oh, no.
And so that was the thing. I was like, cool, there'll be other people here. It was only me. And I was like, oh my, there's a lot of people here. And so I was told by Lee, as he directed me, because I was the only one standing up, right? He said, look to your left, look to your right, look behind you, and look in front. All the people here surrounding you are here to help you engage and do what you will with bonsai, something of that matter. And that really solidified and made me feel comfortable. We've tried to utilize that now and are continuing to do so in our local club here. It's a little easier to do with a larger audience than a smaller one. But they also utilize the idea that mentorship programs work, where they have like a mentorship 101 with a series of seasonal workshops and things in that way, engagement for the new people coming in that have no idea or very minimal or some idea of what they're doing. I know Ryan started you were in Seattle, Ryan. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I started in the Puget Sound Bonsai Association before I could even drink. I was 20 years old when I went to the first meeting over there. So I was kind of used to being the youngest guy at their meetings for a while. And this is actually a big can of worms, Tori. I don't know if you realize it, but we could spend the whole rest
I'm
of the
here
interview
for it.
talking about
I'm
this.
really glad
Yeah.
to be wrong. This is my
Yeah.
favorite time to be wrong.
Yeah, so I've thought about why is it that there's not that many younger people in bonsai? And I've thought about writing a whole article about it. So I've kind of got some different areas that we can discuss, like what are the barriers and how can we solve them? So I think part of it may be that these people could be getting into bonsai, these like below 30 people, but they may be kind of like in the early phases where they're growing them, it doesn't work out, and so I'm seeing that may happen some. It takes some time to learn to keep a house plant alive or a bonsai tree alive. And a lot of people, when it doesn't work after the first time, they'll give up. So maybe we'll lose some people that way. But maybe some of those people, they keep it alive, but they don't think to go to get more into it until several years later. So maybe by that time they're starting to get older and like be more comfortable going to this type of a meeting, like a social meeting. I don't know. I think that a lot of younger people have some level of social anxiety. And I'm also kind of noticing that there's like this weird feeling when people are in college where they don't always want to hang out with older people. Like it's not a cool thing to do sometimes, or like
I'm
they
the
don't get
weirdo.
used to that until they're working afterwards, I'd say. So maybe that's part of it too.
I guess I went on the opposite end. I'm the weirdo. I like hanging out with older people.
I
Learned a
always
lot from them.
have been attracted to older people as
Yeah.
well, like
Old
as far
souls.
as in a friendship sort of way.
For sure.
I've
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
hung around. But I like what you said there. You kind of just blew my mind. I realized I had a limited perspective. I realized now that I was kind of thinking in terms of what it was like for me in that age. And like, I don't know how I could have been so short-sighted until this point to not think that other people's experience right now of 20 would be different, considering how different the world is.
2020 was a big impact too. We've
Yeah,
heard a
it's
lot.
a different world. And then also I really like the idea of what you said, Kevin, about like we're planting seeds. And I think that well, maybe you didn't say it exactly like that, but that was how I
That was
heard
my
it.
intention.
Like, yeah.
No, thank you for
like
extrapolating my Kevinisms.
like we're planting the seed. Like, so it's kind of like, when people get that first one, they see the Karate Kid, like a lot happened in our generation, or they saw the one on the side of the road, like what happened to me. It's that exposure to where maybe sometime later in life they'll come across one in a Home Depot and get it and then dive back down again.
Yeah. I think too, the more you talk with people that want to get into it, you'll have a buffer. And Lee Cheadle told me this. I'm like, Lee, how do you know if people want to get into it deep or not? He's like, you'll know by the output or the words they use. What he meant by that is that he's a classically trained chef, very good competitions. Then he got into bonsai when he had his first kid as a baby, the whole thing. But he said the way that he knows people are into it is by them showing up and them wanting more and them asking questions and then providing volunteer time. But to keep them coming back is where nobody really has a specific answer, because it depends on your climate, your population, and your community. What I've been trying to implement out here for our local club is that we have people that drive almost an hour to come to a meeting sometimes. But then you find that there are people close to those communities or literally live right down the street and they didn't know they were neighbors. So you connect the dots to them and say, hey, you guys should create a little hub group when you're there to talk shop and work together seasonally, and then come back and let us know what you guys are doing. So those little marks of like chapters or whatever you want to call them can be a really specific thing that helps people engage more, because the thing I feel that people lose a lot with bonsai is it becomes a personal endeavor and they lose that idea of collaboration. Like skateboarding, right? Skateboarding is an individualized thing, but you have a community that hypes you up. You need the hype man or the hype people to have your support in the back and be like, you got that tree, man. Look at that. You dug that thing out. Oh, you styled the crap out of that thing, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But in relation, it's like, Ryan and I, we live same context and community. both in school, we try to get our time in with our trees as we can with our partners too, and that balance, right?
Mhm.
But we're always picking each other's brain of like, what's next? Him and I do a lot with teaching because we need to know how we can improve ourselves by only understanding where we're faulting at, right?
Mhm.
And our biggest thing, I think, for what we've considered is we sometimes forget where we started, as you just stated too, what it was like being 20, but even starting with plants, because we didn't know what we don't know. We just went through the
Exactly.
process of trial and error a lot of time, but also now we have such a resource too, where YouTube and things in that way, it can get a little fishy. Because the
Mhm.
thing we forget about too is like we watch these videos of people, whether it be Marai, Blue Heron, or wherever else you're at, those are different climates and environments, and people try to do the same things and then get defeated.
Yes.
That's a big thing I tell, because I
Yes.
made on the board for Columbus Bonsai Study, I made the position of membership chair, pretty much, where I'm in charge of members and engagement, because
Mhm.
we need that. Because if you don't have it, your members don't feel connected.
Mhm.
You don't have people greeting everyone that are new every time. I always tell every member, I'm like, hey, board members, if you see someone new, say hi, find out what they're into, direct them and guide them to people that may be in their court.
Give them cuttings.
That, yeah,
Yeah.
free stuff all the time, pay it forward. That's what I think most of us have done. I mean, Ryan studied with Dan Robinson, this, Ryan, like, did that impact you on how you engage with people?
Well, I think it definitely did. So I'm gonna not answer your question right away. I want to say one other thing
Yeah.
first. I would say a lot of what we're talking about, like barriers for young people getting into bonsai, they overlaps with barriers in general, but is maybe young people experience them a little bit more. Like there may be some social anxiety about going up to an experienced person that you've never met before, never talked to before, and asking them a bunch of questions about bonsai. But if they say hi to you first, it kind of breaks the barrier down and makes it a lot easier. So, and then also, Kevin, you were talking about making these like little chapters, um, like maybe a study group, like regional study group, or maybe you encourage like a group chat or like just ways to make this big club smaller so people have more of a chance to get to know each other a little bit better. And that could also be like little events outside of the main club meetings. You know what I mean? So those are some things to think about. And
One
then
thing,
other,
one
oh
thing I
yeah,
want
go
to add on
ahead.
to that real quick is that you want to avoid clicks.
Yeah, you
Sometimes you
want it
get
to
with
be
small
like
groups,
inclusive,
no clicks.
but still making it possible to have smaller scale interaction. Mhm.
Hmm. That sounds like a tightrope.
It
Yeah.
can be if you make it a tightrope, but if you have the engagement for everyone comes
Yeah.
together at a roundtable talk or discussion of like today we have a meeting, or later today on the 19th of November, today Sunday, where it's going to be people are bringing trees, and we hope more people bring in a lot of trees. And we're going to discuss their future options and just talk about it as a, what can I do for the next season? What can I do for the next 2 to 5 years?
I love those meetings. We have those too. Those bring BYOT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, how many people are in your club?
I honestly don't know how many are on the roster or how many could be at any meeting if they all showed up, but I would say that roughly 30 to 40 people show up for a meeting
That's great.
generally.
That's
So
great.
it depends on what's happening. If it's a, pop-in meeting, maybe there's a lot of people, maybe closer to 40, but if it's kind of slower or whatever, like I think that the meeting where we all voted was like 10 to 20 people.
Mm.
So
One thing that's popped in my mind, if you all do like PowerPoint presentations or lectures of something, having younger people like ourselves, not that older people can't do it, but in that engagement where they see reflective face, right? Like, oh, that person looks like me in regards of age or whatever. But also too, engaging with new members and asking them their ideas and saying, hey, if you want to do that, hop on up. It puts pressure on them, but it also gives them that like, oh, I have a voice in this too. I'm like, yeah, you're a member. Like, we want to hear what you have to say. We want to hear your knowledge. Teach us what we don't know. And
Yeah.
that's been a positive outcome, I think, for us too.
Yeah, a big thing is kind of like making the board representative, like not all the old experienced people, but maybe some people with new ideas, some newer members, and like having younger people on the board. If you have any young people in your club already that are like showing interest, then if you can say, hey, have you ever thought about being on the board? Like it's not that much work. You just have to help out with organizing.
Lies.
But
Okay.
well, yeah, okay. It's not that much
I
work
was
at first.
super
That's how they bait
skeptical.
you in.
No,
Being-
it's how much work you want to put in, really.
Yeah. There's like different levels, different positions are more work than others, but we don't necessarily require a lot of work from a brand new board member. We just want to show them like this is what we're doing behind the scenes. But the good thing about pulling them in or getting sucked in my case, is that it helps you get involved and get to know all the senior members. So that's just another like small scale interaction, I guess. But also I was going to say, having younger people, it kind of encourages innovation in the club. Maybe you do an outreach event that you didn't do before because they have a connection to the anime convention or whatever. Or maybe they are digitizing your lectures and putting them online, and then you'll pick up some more young people that way or something. Maybe someone wants to make TikToks out of the club meetings. I don't know. I haven't even, I'm not young enough for that, but.
But I will say something on the complete flip side.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to account for the engagement of the people who've been the veterans of the club, because
Yeah.
they will burn out too and they'll go away. And that way you don't really have a foundation of what was there as far as history and the availability to teach what they know.
Yeah.
And
it's always a balancing act.
That's the thing that happens a lot. But as you said your second vice president, which is pretty cool that you have those specific positions. You're in line to do a lot more with that too, especially if you have like co-chairs that are like directors or membership chairs or volunteer engagement coordinators, right? Those can be great because you can create, I don't want to say guidelines, but just avenues to go down to get people engaged that may be in their first or second realm of experience with a tree or the club meeting. Those are, yeah.
So why did you, I guess, what inspired you to start a club at the college?
I think I talked to Ryan about it for a while. That was a goal of mine. And because I moved here from Oregon, my wife's doing her PhD, right? And we've been here since 2015. And I knew going out to where I'm at now in Ohio and Columbus, I had these big goals and ideas that I wanted to do for my life. I had a network of people, I still do, in Oregon, outside of family. I've made a big network, lived there for 30 years. So you get to know your surroundings pretty well. I wanted to have a bigger community engagement with younger people or bring the idea that we need new blood and just new, fresh perspective. Also entertaining the idea of like, what aren't we doing with bonsai? I myself, I'll say here, I have intentions to turn bonsai into a therapeutic horticulture approach in relation to helping people with mental health issues or underserved communities in that way. That's my big thing.
Like an art therapy sort of deal?
It's all intertwined. Yeah. Horticultural therapy is a divided line of like degree with like a committee. Therapeutic horticulture is more of that the active and passive experience of like actively working with plants or passively strolling through a garden and taking in nature. Think of the idea of the Japanese word shinrin-yoku, the nature bathing, right? That's also part of that passive experience of being involved. Hey, it's Buck. But engagement was knowing my stress at school, my peers' stress. Well, they're not engaging with nature, but it's the most important thing sometimes in our lives because we still have to have it to live. Why can we not reconnect? So I thought, hey, Ryan, let's start this thing, reconnect people back to nature and have them really just solidify their time of peace and engagement and be happy. From what I can tell, from the outside perspective of seeing the students' engagement, it's a small little group that comes every so often when we do have meetings at school. They leave happier. They leave a little more calm. Ryan, what do you think? What was your perspective when I brought up the idea of the club?
Well, yeah, I think it's just another opportunity to get more people their first exposure into bonsai and to teach them kind of like the basics, I think part of the challenge of us continuing the club, like we've been doing kind of one-off meetings with certain topics, but I think if we had the capability, like the free time to plan more frequent meetings, we might see more people getting involved in terms of the university community of students, and then maybe it could become self-sustaining, but that's a big ask on our schedules, basically.
If we were freshmen and had the afforded availability of 4 years at this campus, I think it'd be different. Also, too, a lot of people, like we were talking about earlier, don't necessarily like community engagement events anymore since pandemic. A lot of people are still stuck in I won't say stuck, but they're still engaged with that idea that sometimes it's scary to go out. Totally valid. Another thing of, I guess, why I started and wanted to have this club go on for the school is that I used it as a teaching awareness of how I engage with people and can create this dynamic of, here's what I want to do for my future. And I've been talking about this since I started. People have asked me, what do you want to do? Like, this is what I want to do. Like, I've never thought about doing that before. Art, bonsai therapy, some people may have, but I want to act it as a nationwide thing. That's my goal. In relation to it, I use this as a niche kind of petri dish of experiment of like, what will people give me in feedback that are in engagement, that have the free time to just kind of figure out their life, what they want to do at this time of their life. And with Ryan and I, we can bounce a lot off, but we don't know what we don't know because we're not in 20s or 19, 20, 21 anymore. I remember my 20s, not that I remember all of it, but it's still a fact that we've already been to there and we don't want to go back all the time,
Yeah, I definitely don't.
But yeah, a lot of the student organizations on campus, they meet like maybe once a week, twice a week.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how we would plan that many
or 2 times a month,
Yeah. So it kind of varies. Maybe there are some organizations that meet less frequently, but then you have less social tie-in on the campus, like people don't feel as compelled to come back maybe because that could be part of why people go to clubs too, is like because they enjoy the people there and hanging out with them, So if we only meet once a month, then there's not as much opportunity to get to know the students that are members.
So I relate it to this in anything in life I do now, is that in Oregon, I was doing construction background. I had my own massage therapy business, moved out here, didn't have it. Came out here, opened up a restaurant, started cooking. Now having my own landscape company and design company, and a massage therapy business on top of that as well. It's the same idea. How do I get people to know that they need this in their life without me ramming it down their throat and having them come back for more? In relation to not selling them on a business perspective, but selling them the health and wellness idea that this will benefit your life if you want to put in the time. And I think the thing is too, with engagement of anybody that gets into it, whether it be young, old, or purple, blue people, whatever you want to call them, they get inundated with this commitment because people they see as a lifestyle, like myself or Ryan, they maybe get like, whoa, kind of off-putting because we're like, this is our thing. This is what we do. But I always remind them, like, you can do this with as much time and effort as you want to put into it, because you make it your time and effort, you makes your fun. If you're just doing it and you're not having fun, then why are you doing it, right? It's just like playing sports. You can't always win, but if you're not playing to have fun, you're always playing to win, you're going to burn out.
Agreed. I think there's some cultural stuff there. Like, I mean, obviously that there's always cultural stuff everywhere, but that whole needing to win and instant gratification, it sort of seems like getting people to slow down, enjoy the moment, and just have a tree is like counterculture in a sense.
Well, we're in that community now and group of, we're all in it. We're on Zoom, but we're in that instant gratification. Look at Instagram. Look at Facebook. Look what these things have done for our lives in the positive, but also not so positive outcomes. And that resistance of, well, why can't I have it now? It's the process through the experience of bonsai or whatever you're doing, whether it be painting or paint by number, whatever you want to do. Clay body, it may not always working. Maybe get some wall wibbles or wobbling walls, whatever you want to call it, in the firing or in the drying stage, right? So that experience, you make it what you will, but it's getting to the end that takes time. And bonsai being an ever growing art, ever evolving, it's always changing. It's a plant that's never, if it's stopped, it's dead.
Yes.
Exactly. And to engage people with that, as opposed to like, oh wait, I can't have a final product like now. Well, no, that's not what this is about. That is an educational component I'm trying to figure out how to get people engaged with, because of the idea that, well, I can't just do it on my phone. Can't just have it tomorrow. Amazon? What, overnight? Like, come on, yo. And that's the thing I go back and forth with, and I talk about it with my family a lot. My wife, my daughter, I talk with her, but she hasn't replied back yet. But through experience of watching people and how they do their thing is the biggest motivator, I think.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And if you look at 2020, majority of people went back to plants. I will say big surge of people at my campus, being the horticulture ag campus. Majority of people I've talked to now that are my peers, quite younger, obviously, a lot of them started in main degrees of like business, science, engineering, but they're like, I really got into plants and I fell in love with plants, and now they're doing horticulture or plant sciences. So it's all that engagement where they've realized it, and now those people are there, but how do you engage the people that aren't there yet?
It's tricky. Give them plants. It's just so hard because like if you don't have time for plants and you aren't on the level where you can look at your plant and recognize that it's a living individual from a specific geographic location, it makes it really challenging unless you just get lucky and someone gives you a plant that happens to be able to take a neglected lifestyle in your geographic location.
Cactus.
Or
Ryan just started his own nursery. How's that process been for you, Ryan?
Well, I've kind of had two separate things going on with it. Like this year, I sold at the Columbus Bonsai Society show for the first time. And there I mostly sold outdoor trees that were kind of like to other club members, some things that I had dug up or grown from seed over the last 6 years or so. And then I've also started doing some more general public type events. And I know, Tori, you've done this too with your pottery. So in those cases, I almost exclusively sell tropical, beginner-friendly species. And that's what they want. I did bring some outdoor ones, but nobody wants outdoor trees for their first tree. That's what it seems like to me anyways. I guess they want to be able to check on it and see it every day. And maybe part of it is that people aren't used to spending a lot of time outside anymore,
That's it.
So maybe it's foreign to have a tree that's worth some money that you need to go out and water every day in the summer, So I don't know, that I do view that as a little bit problematic for our health. Like I personally think that it's healthy for me to spend time outside and go hiking every now and then and all of these things. So I feel like people that are biologists, like biology background like you, Tori, they kind of get the value of nature, but a lot of people, maybe they have blinders on or they're not stopping to appreciate.
There is a thing as plant blindness. People do have it.
Yeah.
It's proven in research, whatever anecdotal or non-anecdotal evidence you have.
Tori, if I could ask a follow-up. So we mentioned, I think we were private messaging a while back about selling pots to the public, and you've been doing that for a little while now. Do you find that can be a gateway for people to get into plants? Like if you have a pot that they really like, and then maybe encourage them to get into bonsai that way?
I have a bonsai pusher at the market. I make mugs with bonsai trees on them. So I don't know if you guys have seen the mugs, but like they've got they've got painted. We might be able to make that happen, Kevin.
Cool.
They they're people see them and they go, oh, like maybe they're not an actual tree. I used to take an actual tree with me, and then I had an incident with Vostok and he fell over and I had to pick my ficus up off the ground and like put all the soil back in, and I was like, no more. So I don't take real trees with me. But when people look at the mugs and they're like, oh yeah, the bonsai trees, I'm always just like, oh, do you do bonsai? And they're like, oh, I had one, it died. I'm like, oh, well, if you don't want them to die, you can join the Dallas Bonsai Society, blah 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 blah. If you want to learn more about it. Or they're like, oh, blah blah blah. I always try and get them to go to the club or encourage them that they could do it again. And then I also I don't take very many bonsai pots with me to like, and I'm talking about not like a club show, that's all bonsai pots, but I'm talking like I'm at like Arts Goggle, like just an art show of mixed makers. So I mostly take cups, and then I take a few bonsai pots, and people be like, why are there holes in this dog bowl? And then I have to like explain it, which is good. So, but it's not a big seller to the general public, but I do like to have it open and available so that people can ask questions if they have an interest, like so we can plant some seeds.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where it's like when you're in the hobby, you don't get why everybody doesn't do it, you know? So
I
maybe we need to
know.
ask somebody that is not interested in plants at all, like,
Why don't you like
their
this?
opinion a little bit more. Yeah.
Something was interesting is that when my wife and I moved over to Ohio, I was like, we're gonna do a road trip over. We're gonna drive over to Ohio because it's an experience in itself. And we filled up a big old Penske, like, 18-foot, 20-foot Penske with our life, my trees in the very back so I could open the door and water them as needed. Well, sure enough, along the pathway through the country, whichever way we went, we'd stop at gas stations generally during the day, and there'd be people that would roll up, be like, is that one of them bonsai trees? I'm like, yeah. They're like, that's cool, and then drive off. I was
Oh, I
like,
love that.
oh wow, okay. In the middle of nowhere in some places too, so it's
Yeah.
there. But I think the biggest thing we've come back to a lot is monetary.
Mm-hmm.
Many people are now in this climate of change and whatever else is going on in the world. Monetary is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
How do we sell somebody a plant that they maybe will not be able to pay rent if they buy it?
I
Mm.
think
The
it's
same with a pot, you know?
yeah. I think it's about finding your market. I could like go on and on about the state of the world. We'll save that.
Right. Yeah. For
But
other
Part
bonsai,
three
I'll tell you
coming
what,
in the future.
that'd be a whole different podcast. The
other
world ain't
podcast
ready.
series. There you go. That's the name of the World Ain't Ready
The
podcast
world
series.
ain't ready. I thought about the other one is a Potter with a podcast. If we ever changed it.
It's funny.
But it is hard. I don't really have a ton of money, and I have experience with poverty and know of people in that current experience. And it's hard when you're in a survival situation. That's what I mean when I say we're in a privilege to be in a position to even think about art.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what everybody's going through. You know, you don't have any idea. And if somebody came out to a free event because they wanted to walk around town with their family because they literally can't do anything else, they're not going to be someone you're going to be able to sell a tree to.
Yeah.
But maybe getting people, if they could find out a way to do it on the cheap. Uh, like I know I mix a lot of different soils and substrates that are somewhat questionable. I use some organic stuff in there because it's affordable. Pumice is really expensive, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I miss it in Oregon being cheap. Ryan does too for Seattle.
But I don't know how to overcome that other than short of changing the entire economic system. I don't know, because those people are just going to be in a different place.
From my experience, what helped me, because when I got in, I wasn't making money. I'm in school again, so I'm not making much money.
Yeah, for sure.
Diapers keep changing in size, and so do shoes for a little baby, right? So it's cool. I love it, seeing growth. But in the responses too, I grew up with Lee and other people doing the pay it forward method. You volunteer your time, you get to work on trees that maybe you don't have availability to, but also you get free material. You get free things because you're showing up.
I love that.
And that's how I grew up into it. And, Ryan and I've exchanged trees. We've given trees to new people. And if it's an availability where I've thought about maybe for this year, as I'm talking about now that Ryan just brought it up now, we had our show. What if we have some things that people don't necessarily want and they don't need to sell, but we can give it away as a donation to people who are new that want to get in, but don't have the access. And then we help them take care of the tree. There's an opportunity there. Mind you, the tree has to be healthy. You can't just be like, oh, I don't want this because it's almost on death's door. No, it's got to be something that's like you don't want to work on or you haven't touched in like 4 years or 2 years. Project tree that never becomes anything but a project.
Yeah,
that's where I'm thinking now, because I have trees I'm trying to get away, because in my existence now as a father, newly formed, as I'm a new dad, but also a family man, I talked to my wife about it and other people, and I said, if I'm taking more time to water my trees that I haven't even touched for a couple of years that are these project trees, well, it's taking more time away from me with my time with my daughter and my wife. I don't want to do that. So I've limited my size of things now to where it's like, I want what I want and I know what I want, but I don't necessarily need it right now. And I'll work with what I have. And so that way it's engaged more. And I think if people have something to take home or something to work on, it gives them an opportunity to come back and ask more questions because they're running into the same things we already went through.
I love that. Okay, so I think that's a really good idea. And also I think that maybe just as a wild consideration, like if your club is well funded.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, but if it were, or if you could get people to come together, creating access to material for people, I think could be a real game changer in a lot of ways.
If your club or people in your club can become good friends with people who have nurseries,
Mhm.
A lot of time in the nursery industry, whether they be big wholesale nurseries, landscape nurseries, or otherwise, there is material that they can't sell because it's either not the best looking or it's just too much work that they're sitting on stock. They will throw it away sometimes. They'll literally just throw it away. But if you have somebody with an access to a number or to a person in house of those
Mhm.
nurseries, say, hey, would you be willing to donate? Tax write-off, whatever, discounted pricing. I know certain clubs around the country have had opportunities with that, and that's what's helped engage and grow quicker. Just selling the nurseries or the people who will be giving that away on the idea is the tricky part, because you have to make them want what you want for your community.
Interesting.
Yeah. And now we have come full circle on the discussion of young people and barriers, but it's like barrier for everybody, like we were saying. Another kind of idea on overcoming the cost kind of issue. So one thing that we've done a little bit of since I came here is we started to have club yamadori events, and I made sure of that because oftentimes on things like Facebook Marketplace or what have you, people are throwing away bushes or that they wanted to redo their landscaping, and so someone can come salvage those and kind of make those into a bonsai in the long term after they recover from being dug. So like if there's any a really big opportunity like that, like more bushes than I could ever use, then I'll usually try to like reach out to a couple people. Or last spring we had a huge like 60 to 100 house area that was getting leveled for a business park. And we've kind of been following in the news the developments about like the progress of when are they going to start leveling all these houses from the 1960s with all these old shrubs and everything. And so someone in the club knew who in the city to contact. I think it was like the city auditor or something. You may have to ask around in your local city, see who may be in charge of these types of things, because that particular project was owned by the city. So sometimes it may be a company. But anyways, since it was such a large area with so many plants that were just going to get bulldozed and killed, basically. So that one we did like a whole blast to the club and had a bunch of people out and showed them how to dig trees. And so that could be another affordable way for people to get free material. We also had a club member at our show. So Chris, I think his last name is Mead. He was a relatively new club member, but he had these giant jades that he dug in his yard or propagated back when he lived in Los Angeles. And he recently did a pruning on this jade forest. And so he had, I think it was like 50 to 100 or maybe even more than that, little jade cuttings that he had rooted and then brought to the show to give away to anybody that wanted them. So we did give away a lot of those. That could be another good idea to get more people in the club. Maybe if the club buys a mother tree that they just use to propagate and buy the soil and just make it easy to donate those to new people, maybe that could be a way to get more people into it.
I'd like that. Coming in on yamadori, because I had some topics that I just felt were worth discussion. I don't think we're maybe going to break any new ground here, but my club also did a collection, and I agree that's a great way to get material. I got so many trees, and we did like a collaboration with our city park in Dallas. So the club came in and we picked up trash, and then we were able to dig whatever basically. And there are these areas that like in the park, like once or twice a year, they just come through and they run a big old industrial
Kind of like
lawn mower over it. So they get there was just a ton of great stuff there. But as I was collecting it, I was thinking, because I like to think, deeply on everything. And I was like, well, what if everybody did this? And I was like, I guess in this sense, it'd be okay. But then I was thinking about how, like, in some other interviews, I'd heard that in Japan, like, there's hardly anything left that you can collect because people took too much of it.
And you can't legally collect over there either.
Okay, so that's good. At least there's laws. But I feel like our world can be somewhat reactive instead of proactive. So I just think it's worth mentioning on a podcast out loud that we should all, and I know you guys know this, but just everybody collectively should consider if a tree is worth taking. I mean, clearly construction and landscape and rescue operations are ideal.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just kind of like, you see something on land that's not going to get destroyed, and it's like, is it worth taking? How would you guys determine maybe when a tree should be left alone
Yes.
Oh,
So it really
outside
varies.
of like state parks and stuff that's already protected?
Yeah.
mm,
It kind of varies by the environment.
Mhm.
So, we may have a little bit different advice on this here in Ohio, where we mostly have deciduous yamadori. But what I normally do is I kind of look to see, is this forest having natural regeneration? Are there younger plants that are growing up? Because the ones that we want for bonsai tend to be, they have some interesting characteristic, like they got a scar on it, or it got bent down when it was trying to grow upwards or something like that.
Mhm.
So if there's lots of other straight ones that I know I'm not going to dig, then those will all be left behind. Like for me, only looking for certain interesting aesthetics, that's a minority of all the trees. So as long as there are other individuals that are regenerating in that forest, and as long as I'm not going for a relatively rare species that, maybe should be left alone in that local area to make more of itself, then that's kind of what I think about.
Mhm.
Kevin, did you have anything to add there?
oh, that's a touchy subject for a lot of people, in relation to what we're
Mhm.
seeing in regards of protected forests or things in that way. If you have public access to land, how's the aftercare, or the people, filling the holes in the practice of that thing, where it's
Mm,
like, do you leave it like you weren't there? A lot of
yeah.
people don't, and that's when it gets ruined.
And that kind of adds to the ability for natural regeneration. Like if you leave a big hole, then water can pool in there and a tree's not going to grow back there. So you kind of want to fill it back in, maybe add some compost and sticks on top of that or whatever's around. But
Plant an
sorry, go ahead.
acorn.
Yeah.
Or even if it's like a farmer's land, he's going to be pretty upset because his cows may have injuries or
Mhm.
whatever. Nobody wants a big old hole full of water. You have disease and other things going there, sometimes pathogens and whatnot. Um, Through my landscape company, I've been afforded the opportunity to dig a lot of yardadori, I call it, because being in Oregon, you have mountain ranges. Being in the Midwest, you don't, unless you go far west into like Appalachian, territory.
Mhm.
That's a good drive. Not short, not too long, but just a route where it's like that's a big commitment to take. For here, I think the best way to do an introduction to this idea of digging in the natural landscape is if someone has property, they allow you to do it, and it's younger material, do it that way, because then you'll be able to understand how aftercare works and how you can make it work in your climate and environment and your microclimate. First thing though, before anyone goes digs, understand where your area, your zone of growing climate is, your microclimate at your house, because it will be different throughout your yard or whatever have you.
Mhm.
If you have a good friend that has like space, maybe you can hold stuff there. It's just there's a lot of context to this thing because it comes up often, and it's a lot of very political in some ways where it's like, well, you're just destroying this or you're ruining that. Ryan and I go down to his aunt and uncle's place in Southern Ohio, and we do some digging there, and we're allowed the opportunity because there is an overabundance of deciduous trees down there, to which we're helping in this relation of like not clear cutting, but we are allowing this space to allow for more growth in ways where it's not competitive.
Mhm.
Healthy competition, but not over the abundance of like everything's losing because this one tree's winning. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a thing I go back and forth with a lot. I don't really have an answer for that myself, but it's just through experience you learn what's good and what's not.
Mhm.
And then you learn even more so going farther.
And it's one of those things that you want to kind of constantly be evaluating. Like talking about my aunt and uncle's place, I went down there this fall. We've got some kind of ongoing experiments. So I explored a little bit of new areas there. And one thing that I've noticed is that certain areas are really dense with seedlings. And so in nature, those would compete, crowd each other out, and some of them will survive to get full size. So in that type of area, it actually, you may be saving the plant's life by removing it and using it for bonsai, because otherwise it would naturally compete and get overcrowded in that environment. And then another area where it's not so dense, maybe those ones you or like if you did many trees in that overcrowded area, you kept digging them out year after year, and then it started to get too sparse, then you should probably take a step back, go to other places for a while, let everything regenerate. So those are the types of things that we think about, I would say. And then there's another side of this equation that we haven't talked about, but I also think a lot about, since I'm interested in native species, I think also about propagating from in other ways, like from seed or cuttings. I'm not really good at cuttings for native species, but I do mostly seeds. So I think that if you do both of these things, then, you know, you can kind of reduce the demand for the wild material because you're propagating from seed. You follow my meaning here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Something to add on to that, Ryan, is that I just thought about within context of wanting wild material, look for invasive material.
Yes. That's one thing I was meaning to bring up. So that exchange that you mentioned, Tori, where you guys made a deal with the park, they let you dig whatever as long as it was like you guys did the exchange of picking up the trash. We did something similar here, but we got the Columbus City Parks to allow us to dig invasive plants, which they have a ton of. And I think they have like 400 properties that they're in charge of. And every year they try to go to as many of these as possible and cut down and kill all of the invasive honeysuckle. That's the major one here. We also have some other invasives like white mulberry, privet, and tree of heaven. And the Bradford pear. So all of these ones, they were okay with us digging any of those that we found, basically. And some of them make really good bonsai. So I did an article actually about showing pictures of honeysuckle as finished bonsai. And some of them were made by what we know to be famous bonsai artists, like Walter Paul, Bill Valvanis, Nick Lenz, or maybe it was a student of Nick Lenz's, but his name is in the article. But anyways, so just because it's invasive and not necessarily wanted in the landscape and not ecologically valuable in that native area, it can still really make good bonsai. Like they have white or pink flowers and red berries and still be very aesthetically pleasing. And I think a lot of people just overlook those because they're like, oh, that's common, you know, but you can still find some that have really nice trunks and that can be worth digging to use for bonsai. And then you're actually doing the environment a favor by removing that. So part of why the parks like kills all of these invasives is to try to allow the native plants to grow more and, you know, hopefully not get outcompeted. So by removing that, you're also removing that plant that was taking up a spot that a native plant could take. And then you're also kind of removing the ability of that invasive to produce seeds because you're making it much smaller as a bonsai, but also you can prune off all of the flowers when they're done or the berries to prevent them from going back into the environment. So that's native species are very nice to be ambassadors, but invasive species are very nice to learn on for bonsai and really good practice material for anybody who wants to practice digging yamadori.
I feel like I'm doing it just right then because I am a kidnapper of mimosas.
Okay. Is that invasive in your area?
It is. It's the, what is it? I have it here. I'm going to butcher this for you, pre-science folks. Albizia jubilabrissin.
Sounds about right. I've never heard the species name pronounced before.
But yeah. So my neighbors have one. They're really popular in the landscape, but also they're incredibly invasive. So like people buy them and plant them, but like you probably shouldn't because every spring there's at least 6 of them that come up in my yard. And I just dig the seedlings and stick them in pots and I'm like, welcome to my experiments. Oh, they're cool though. I like, and we get the privets too. So to the Chinese privets. I've got one of those too as well. I really like the idea. I feel a lot better hearing your perspective on it because I was like, I wonder if I should keep these invasives or if I should technically be not having these. So, because I was kind of like, they're still alive, but they're in a pot. So,
yeah, I guess it's a complicated thing.
Yeah.
So the reason we want to remove them from the environment is so that the native plants can grow more, which they tend to feed more insects. And you may already know this. I'm just kind of explaining.
Yeah, no, it's good for everybody listening.
Yeah. So The native insects, the native birds, the native like deer, everything in the food chain, they'll kind of be adapted for eating the native plants. And one thing that I've been learning about recently, this whole past year, there's a really good podcast about native gardening that I'll shout out. They don't sponsor us, but it's a guy named Thomas Christopher, and his podcast is named Growing Greener. So all of his podcasts are so informative, and they're only 30 minutes. I'm just blown away every time. But so what I've learned from his podcast is that oftentimes insects, which are kind of the base of the food chain, they're very important for bird populations and all of that. They will have a very specific relationship with a host plant or a host genus. So you may get like a certain, like a tulip tree, one of the native trees here, may have a couple of species that only live on that tree. And so that's why it's kind of important to keep space for those native plants, because there's so many species that have a very specific relationship. And if that tree is no longer available, then that insect will go extinct, or so that's kind of a big part of the biodiversity crisis right now. But anyways.
I mean, that's well said, and very important for people to remember as well. Gosh, there's so much nuance. Everything's so complicated. I feel like I'm laying around in the soup half the time.
Sometimes it feels overwhelming, but you can focus on what you're doing that can have a positive impact. That's kind of what I tell myself.
Same. That's why I recycle.
Yes, do that.
Like, this had better be recycled. Right.
Were there any more major questions that you had, Tori? I kind of have to go cook some chili before our bonsai meeting. And I don't have to do right away, so
because
just like
I have ran out of questions.
Okay.
I don't know how long we've gone, so like the planning part of me is like, is it enough time yet? Because there's no timer for me on this one.
We've gone for about an hour or so.
Combined, we're over 2 hours, almost 2.5. So that's pretty good.
Okay, so that's one for each of us. That's good.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think with yours, with editing the beginning point, it's probably about an hour or 20.
Yeah.
And then for ours, it's like about an hour.
Which is pretty good.
I'm sure there's tons to talk about.
We did have a listener question from
we forgot about that.
Whoa.
It is, where'd it go? Right here.
Did they ask why I have so many Instagram names?
No. This is from Con.
You know what I realized last time we read
Bonsai.
a question from this person, Kevin? So I think I might have mistyped their name. On Instagram, it's Connie Mara. And I think last time we read a question from them, I thought it was Connor. So
yeah, there's an R in there. So yeah. Maybe there wasn't. I don't know. But Connie Mara asks for you, Tori, what is your highest demand or most frequent commission for pots?
I don't do commissions. I don't ever make the same pot twice, really. So like it's hard to say that like anything has, because I think to know what has a high demand, I mean, my best-selling mug is red and cream. But like as far as like the bonsai pots, it's hard to say. I mean, there's just so many people that like so many different things, and I make so many different things that like the weird people buy my weird pots and the chill people buy my chill pots, and it's
Do you have them labeled as that, like weird pots for weird people, chill pots?
No. One of the best compliments I ever got, I sent a bunch of pots that were just stuff I liked to the Greenwich Gardens up in I sent them some stuff, and they said one of their old time classic old Japanese bonsai men came in, real old school. He picked it up and he said, "The craft is great, but these are weird." And I was like, that is the best compliment, because somebody traditional is like, these are weird, not like that in a negative way, I don't think, but just to say that it's something unexpected, but to admit that the craft is there, and that was just the best thing to hear.
That's awesome.
But I don't know what a bestseller is. I make glossy ones and make matte ones. People say that they don't like glossy, but people buy my glossy pots, so I don't know.
There's a niche for everyone.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. So I just make what I like and find the people that like it.
Not that this has anything to do with recording, just a question I thought just to talk real quick. Have you considered contacting the Purple Pot Society?
I remember, and I have contacted them. I didn't want to take up too much of their time, but I did want to I wanted to donate with them and do a fundraiser for them because I was thinking about giving them a big purple dragon pot with some crazy lusters on it, something obnoxious to do a fundraiser.
This winter, when I'm back in Oregon visiting family, I will be stopping by Michael Hagdorn's garden to see him and talk with him and his apprentice now. Current apprentice is Carmen. From what I've talked to Carmen about when I met her in person at the national show, she's really interested in those kind of outlets. As she's on the
she's
co-founding member or something. Bring it up to him. The worst I could say is right now.
No, I reached out I emailed them about it and closer to nationals, like before nationals, because I thought that they might have a table there. So I had suggested that that I do a fundraising pot, like I'd give them a pot to auction off at nationals, but they weren't going to be there. So they were like, maybe sometime in the future. So I'm still open to that. I would love to. I've been developing different purple glazes. I've got 3 different purples right now that I don't love any of them yet, but we're working on it.
Sparkles and speckle. I like those.
I love my speckles. They're very non-traditional. I had someone at the club meeting come up to me, just some older person, and they were like, "Why do you use speckles?" And I was like, "Because I like them."
Because I can't.
Because Texas, do it at home. No, I don't know. I just like them.
Awesome. Tori, I gotta go myself.
Of course.
Gotta do some stuff before the club meeting today.
Awesome.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you guys.
This was a lot here. I got to think about good stuff and just extrapolate some things outside of the art form too.
Well, I really appreciate you guys helping me with my podcast and being my temporary co-hosts. And I'm down to chat big thoughts anytime.
Yeah. Thanks for helping us get to know you better, Tori. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for that pot. I will show you. I'll send you the video or the picture when I have it all potted nicely in the spring.
Oh, Ryan got a pot? Lucky dog.
I'm sorry. I just
no,
I need to send you a mug though.
No, you're good. You're good. If you feel like you want to, it's cool. If not, no worries. No, I look forward to seeing and hearing what you come up with at your podcasts and getting more of your style and what you want to talk about. You're doing good.
Thank you guys. I really, really appreciate it. I'm not holding y'all hostage. Y'all get to your lives.
No, for sure. Tell your husband we said hey and thank you for your time with him. You know, all that. Of course. And I'm gonna dip out, guys. Have a wonderful Ryan. I'll see you in a couple hours.
Yep.
And Tori will probably run into you in the future in person.
Hopefully in person one day.
I'm gonna try to go to things.
Good. Ryan is too. Ryan is too.
I don't know when, but I'll try.
That's the same.
Later, everyone. Stay safe.
Have a good Sunday. Today's episode was recorded, edited, and produced by Ryan Houston, Kevin Ferris, and Kelly Louie. To find out more and see pictures relevant to today's topic or sponsors, see the show notes linked in the description or at bonsaitimepodcast.com. To submit questions, suggestions, or tree pictures for future discussion, find the contact form also on our website or message us directly at bonsaitimepodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to support us in making more episodes, consider rating us, sharing with friends, donating, or becoming a sponsor. Our music was provided by MIDI Cancer. To find more of their work, check out their SoundCloud and Bandcamp pages. To stay in touch with us, subscribe to us in your podcast app or find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Bonsai Time Podcast or on TikTok at Bonsai Time Pod. Also, Kevin and Kelly are at Kevin_FerrisPNW and Bonsai with Kelly, respectively, on Instagram. And Ryan is invivobonsai.com and on all social media. Remember, have fun and bonsai on.